Be in the know with unlimited access to IBJ and Inside Indiana Business. Our in-depth coverage of all things business means you'll always be completely in the know. Subscribe for just $1 a week. Get started now at ibj.com/trial offer.
Watch new episodes of Your Money unfold every day. Now streaming on Lake City Bank Digital.
High-tech banking at Lake City, a far cry from when the bank started in 1872, during the era of coins and greenbacks. On this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast, Lake City Bank CEO David Findlay joins us to discuss how one of Indiana's largest community banks continues to grow while staying true to its local roots. And I'm pleased to be joined on the podcast this week by David Findlay, the chairman and CEO at Lake City Bank. And David, always great to see you and hear from you. How are you?
Good, Gary. Just trying to figure out how we can drive loan growth and economic expansion in central and northern Indiana.
Good. Well, that's what we definitely want to talk about, that and what you're seeing out there. To kind of kick us off, though, certainly lots going on in the economy from a macro level nationally and here in Indiana. What's your general take on the economy right now?
I think broadly, when you consider where we operate, which is central Indiana and north central and northeast Indiana, a pretty strong economy. We've talked a lot about the opportunities that the growth in Indianapolis is providing on both the commercial real estate and the commercial and industrial and manufacturing lending. Population growth is such an important driver of that. We've got a map in our investor deck that for years, from 2000, 2020, 21, 22, it almost apologized for the absence of population growth in our footprint, which today is 15 counties. And when you layer in the 2025 version of that map, there is population growth occurring in more than half our Indiana counties. And that population growth is reflective of economic growth and expansion and business growth. And so we're in the broadest sense, pretty encouraged by what we're seeing economically. We continue to be concerned about the impact of tariffs on our borrowers. I think tariffs are having an effect on economic growth and expansion for the manufacturing sector in particular. There's a lot of supply chain logistics issues being worked on by our borrowers. There's clearly an impact to cost of goods sold where you can't find an alternative channel to source that. And so, well, we've seen pretty stable economic activity. We do see a governor being put in place by those tariffs. But more broadly, even in Elkhart County, my home county, and just probably the most intensive manufacturing, industrial, and entrepreneurial place in the state of Indiana, the RV industry and the manufacturing industry is really pushing through some of the challenges they're having and not having anything near the impact they had back during the Great Recession.
As you look at that, certainly Indiana, you mentioned Elkhart County, but Indiana overall continues to be, of course, a manufacturing-driven economy. Do you see other sectors, whether it's the life sciences or some other areas, new energy, beginning to emerge, or is it still going to be pretty much a manufacturing-driven economy?
Both in central Indiana and in northeast Indiana, we've got the impact of the growth of the sciences. And we're the orthopedic capital of the world here in our hometown of Warsaw, Indiana. I've been very involved for the last 15 years with an organization called OrthoWorks, which is a 501c3 formed with the support of the Lilly Endowment and with BioCrossroads support. And David Johnson's great help there. What the good news is, coming out of those efforts in both central Indiana and northeast Indiana are science-based business opportunities, but truthfully, they're not traditionally bank financeable projects. We've got some really neat startups that have occurred in northeast Indiana that will become good bank customers at some point, but right now they're capital-intensive users, and they're not traditionally bankable in that sense. A lot of private equity and family office exchange money, but not much on the commercial banking side.
Talk about, David, what you're seeing from a growth standpoint. You mentioned population growth, and certainly there are pockets, I think, around the state that are standing out. You mentioned northern Indiana, northeast Indiana. Fort Wayne has been a star, I think, for performer for a while. Here in central Indiana, I think a tipping point in many respects for downtown and the area here, the Leap District up in Boone County. Where are you seeing some, in your view, exciting things happening?
I'll start with the last example you gave, and that's Boone County. Clearly the IEDC decision to make the significant investment that the state has in Boone County and the follow-on investments coming with Lilly being the lead. That is just as we all know, it's not a heavily industrialized or high population growth market, but it's going to become that. So we and probably every other bank with operations in central Indiana are heading northwest to Boone County. We are in the process of remodeling an existing building into a pretty large Lake City Bank office in Whitestown, right in the middle of all the action there. That's going to get us positioned to dive into the growth that's going to happen in Boone County and the follow-on investment that will come from Lilly and their supply chain and others that will go there. We all need to be there, and it's going to be a great place to grow. In Indianapolis, we're continuing to see ongoing investment from a commercial real estate perspective on logistics, warehouse, distribution activity in Whitestown, where it's been going on for a number of years at the airport. But it's slowed, but it's not disappeared. And Governor Braun's decision to retitle us again the Crossroads of America, I think, is reflective of what we're seeing in that part of the central Indiana business, the logistics, warehouse, and distribution stuff. We are clearly the crossroads of America, and there's so much infrastructure built around that we're all benefiting from. And then finally, in Northeast Indiana, whether it's in Warsaw or Fort Wayne or up into Auburn, I would say continued expansion in healthcare. We don't talk about that much, but the healthcare systems in our Indiana footprint are growing. We love to bank physician to hospital or healthcare practices, and that business, despite the fact that many of these docs go to work for hospital systems today, there's still plenty of independent opportunities out there with surgery centers and privately held healthcare practices.
Yeah, David, give us a thumbnail. I want to talk about your growth around the state, but a thumbnail description of Lake City Bank, a bank that's been around for a while, 150 plus years, right? So it's got some rich heritage, in particular, Northern Indiana. Give us the thumbnail description of Lake City Bank.
Sure, 153 years. So you were very close. This bank was formed in 1872 with the name Lake City Bank on the door, which is a story in of itself when you think about how good the banking business has been for the sign business over the last 40 years. We fortunately have not been. The bank is an organic grower, which means we've not grown through mergers and acquisitions. In my 25 years at the bank, we haven't done a single acquisition, and yet we've grown from $1 billion in total assets to $7 billion. In that same time window, we've grown essentially from 37 branches, primarily in Northeast Indiana, to now 55 in Northeast, North Central, and Central Indiana. We're very commercial and industrial and manufacturing driven as a lender. But with that earlier commercial real estate focus I talked about, particularly in Indianapolis. And I think the greatest thing about the story of this bank is we still, at $7 billion, consider ourselves a community bank. We're driven by these relationships we have, and we love to build everywhere we are. And we're a net branch builder as opposed to a net branch shrinker, which a lot of our peer banks are going through right now.
Yeah, talk about that, because as you mentioned, consolidations, acquisitions, mergers have been the kind of the lay of the land in the banking industry for a long time. How has Lake City Bank been successful in remaining independent and community focused?
Well, the remaining independent is a relatively easy answer, and that's shareholder value. And if active M&A was the best path to creating shareholder value, we'd be really good at it. And there's a lot of banks that are. So it's not to say that M&A is a bad strategy, but we believe when you build the bank, literally one deposit at a time, one loan at a time, one building, one commercial banker, one wealth advisory officer, you're building the organization's foundation as you go every step of the way. And because we've been able to identify high growth market opportunities, which is kind of, when you think about Northern Indiana, you say, where the heck was that in 1990? Right. And the answer for us was Elkhart, Indiana. We showed up when the two main banks in Elkhart got sold, one to NBD that ultimately became JP Morgan Chase, and one to Ameritrust that ultimately became KeyBank. And we went in and started stealing their customers. And as Mike Kabaki, my predecessor, used to love to say, all we do is steal other banks' customers. And that's still true today. I think by not being acquisitive, it also allows us to be laser focused on the business we got and not the business we might get through M&A. It's all shareholder value driven, and then beyond that, it's culture driven. Every bank loves to say they have great culture, but when your culture's not been diluted by acquisition, you can look at our balance sheet. There is not a loan on our balance sheet that we didn't originate out of Warsaw, Indiana, in our credit committee process. So we know our markets, we know our customers really well.
As you look at locating branches and locations around the state, the strategy around that, I think, is probably interesting, maybe more interesting today than it was 10 or 20 years ago. I look at some of the locations Lake City has identified, 16 Tech, the River District in Elkhart. What's that? How does that process play out?
It's nice of you to pick on those too, because 16 Tech is a place that we have been partnered with the 16 Tech organization essentially from its founding. It's an entrepreneurial organization. It's a new idea organization. We wanted to figure out a path in Indianapolis to connecting into that life science business, which 16 Tech was all about with their original development. We were ready to be an anchor in building 2. And at 16 Tech, when that building got going, we financed a big portion of 16 Tech. And when building 2 didn't happen, we said, we want to show up still. Can we go in the AMP? And we opened a 800 square foot office in the AMP in what looks like a cargo container, but we manufactured in the original construction looks like it. It's not a high volume branch. It's not a highly active branch, but it's the messaging to the Indianapolis market and all those people that walk through the AMP on their way into the 16 Tech building from the parking lot to look and say, Lake City Bank's here. Mm-hmm. The River District in Elkhart, for those listeners who don't know, is really the rebirth of downtown Elkhart. Because I'm an Elkhart native, I love what we've done in the River District. It's an area of town that was anchored by the Health and Aquatics Center, which the Community Foundation of Elkhart County got behind, and that has been the genesis for a rebirth of downtown Elkhart. We are financing a great deal of what's happening there. It is a classic view of entrepreneurialism and can-do attitude that Elkhart is full of. And really, neither one of those are reflective of why we build branches in other places, because in central Indiana, in the Indianapolis market, this Whitestown branch that I spoke about earlier, got to be there. We will be in Lebanon within a short period of time because we want to get closer to the growth that's going to happen there in population and business. We look south to Johnson County and we need to be better down there. So we're looking at further expansion south of Johnson into Franklin and looking for opportunities there. The I-65 corridor, if you just stop and think about, what was the gap between Northwest Indianapolis and the amazing things going on in Tippecanoe County called Boone County. And now that gap is going to get closed. And so we're looking for population growth. We're looking for economic expansion. And at the core, we're looking for manufacturing, industrial growth that we can be the lender to people that make something.
Yeah. Technology is such an important part, obviously, in all industries and changing rapidly. And certainly the banking industry would be a part of that. Talk about how technology is impacting your vision for the bank. I know you made a major investment in downtown Warsaw, right, in the Innovation and Technology Campus that you've got there. How has technology kind of reshaped your business?
Dramatically, in a word. Lake City Bank Digital, which is today's mobile app for both commercial and retail, we brought live in April of 2021 in the midst of the pandemic. And we did that because we identified its predecessors in a branch closed world were not good enough to service our clients. And we implemented Lake City Bank Digital. It competes with all our big bank brethren beautifully. 4 years later, it's one of the best technology decisions we've made. The Innovation and Technology Center, which I'm literally watching the Wygan construction guys across the street gutting, is less so assigned to the clients of the bank about innovation and technology, and more so a message to our own team. We cannot rest on our laurels. We're now talking about stablecoin and alternative payment systems to our Federal Reserve payment system. We're talking about Federal Reserve FedNow transactions, which are like a wire, except through the Fed system, more speedily they're wired. It's there. Yeah. We still have to maintain our branch infrastructure, our relationships very directly with those customers that want that connect point. But for those customers that don't, we've got to have a technology product that allows them to do everything they need to do with their bank without showing up in a branch. And we look at the client base we've got. We're incredibly surprised when we got our hands on this data. We are serving the Gen X, the Gen Ys, and the millennials more than we are those mature and baby boomers. So our client base reflects the population we're living in today, particularly in some of our more emerging cities, and thankfully our technology takes care of them.
Yeah. But physical branches are still part of the vision, right? Part of your technology is the big driver, but physical branches are still going to be part of the future.
Yeah, I've got a longtime bank investor that I got a lot of respect for. Has a phrase that he throws out all the time that says, if you're not closing branches, you're not optimizing shareholder value. Theory being that branches are becoming a thing of the past. In 2019, pre-pandemic, we had 2.2 million transactions in our Lake City Bank branches. In 2024, we had $2 million transactions in our Lake City Bank branches. So yeah, it's off 10% in 5 years, but there's still somebody doing something 2 million times a year in our 55 branches. And so they are a critical delivery channel. They are absolutely evolving to something more of a problem resolution center or opportunity creation center. But we think our branches are a brick and mortar sign of our commitment to our communities. And in Indianapolis, nowhere is that more important. Today we have 9 offices. The 10th is going to be the earlier one I talked about in Whitestone. And so Indianapolis will continue to be a place we're looking for new branches, because that sends a signal to the community. You're committed here. You're not going to close branches. You're going to open branches and keep growing.
Yep. Much more ahead with Lake City Bank CEO David Findlay. When we return, we'll talk about his path to the CEO role there at Lake City Bank and a lot more when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
As a bank, PNC prides itself on being boring. But the truth is they couldn't be more excited to serve the dynamic Indianapolis community. For nearly 160 years, they've quietly toiled away to deliver brilliant results for their equally brilliant clients. They have dedicated PNC teams throughout the local area all ready to do the boring work to help you unlock your own brilliance. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865. PNC Bank, National Association member FDIC.
We build Indiana. The Laborers International Union of North America builds and maintains roads, bridges, and other essential infrastructure that make us the crossroads of America. So thanks to LIUNA members' work, Hoosiers have a better quality of life, like access to utilities, easier routes to jobs, schools, or medical care, and deliveries keep moving. We build Indiana for good jobs and stronger communities. The Laborers International Union of North America. We are LIUNA.
And welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast. My guest this week is David Findlay, the CEO and chairman at Lake City Bank. And David, we talked a lot about the banking industry and around the state and your vision for Lake City Bank in the first part of the podcast. Let's talk a little bit about you and where you grew up. You mentioned earlier you grew up in Elkhart County. Talk about growing up in Elkhart County, what that was like.
A lot of vans being converted to mobile party places.
Right.
No, my dad was a dentist in Elkhart, and it was always my dream to follow my father's footsteps and become a dentist, and end up back in Elkhart. A D+ in biology my freshman year at DePauw, unfortunately, derailed that effort, and I ended up being a history major at DePauw. I spent 2 summers working for Indiana National Bank in Indianapolis. Other internships in my college years on other financial institutions. And it was really that winter term effort at DePauw and my summer work in banks that took me down the path of becoming a commercial banker. And I knew that Elkhart, Indiana was not the right place to start that career, but I'm thrilled that one of the places I get to be all the time now is Elkhart, Indiana, because everybody still says, well, you're Don Findlay's son. And I say, yep, and that's a pretty good legacy.
I love it. I love it. You mentioned DePauw, and certainly Indiana is so fortunate to be blessed with tremendous public and private institutions of higher learning. DePauw, one of those. How did you pick DePauw?
My parents both went to DePauw, and both loved their experience, and you can recognize the friendships that they had built in their DePauw years, decades later. And I thankfully made the same decision and have had the same benefit of that.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the winter term that kind of got you in the commercial banking space. Did you think about any other? You mentioned the dental thing that kind of went by the wayside. Did you think about any other career paths?
Truthfully, the summer of 1981, after my freshman year, I went to work for Indiana National Bank, and Larry O'Connor was taking a stint as the head of marketing at that time, and I worked in the marketing department. And Larry, unbeknownst to me, was a true commercial banker at heart. And he was on a career stop. And as I got to know Larry, and as Larry took me under his wing in that summer of '81, he had a huge influence on my decision to start pursuing that path in banking after that great experience.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that in terms of mentors or those people who had an impact. So many great people in the banking industry over the years. You mentioned a Larry O'Connor. You mentioned a Mike Kabaki. Who were the really people who influenced you during your career?
At the top of that list is Mike Kabaki. He was my predecessor as chairman and CEO of Lake City Bank. Mike was my first boss when I was a commercial lender in Chicago at Northern Trust Company. I only worked for Mike for a short period of time from 1985 to 1988. But then when I got the opportunity to join him at Lake City Bank in 2000, I still reflect upon that decision. Like, what in the world was I thinking? But I moved to Warsaw, Indiana in 2000, now a little over 25 years ago, and Mike's had a huge influence on my career and still does today as a friend and mentor. Andy Payne, who's
Yeah.
former CEO of Indiana National Bank, was a DePauw grad and had a big hand in my decision, truthfully, to go to work for Northern Trust. I wanted to work for Indiana National Bank, and Andy said, "You can get a better training and better experience at Northern, and then when you want to come to work for us, you got a job." And literally, I chose Northern Trust because of that. So, and Andy, I stayed in touch with Andy for years after that decision. But he was a guiding force, and then a bunch of guys, a bunch of leadership team at Northern Trust. And I still play golf home and away every summer with my Northern Trust buddies. Because it's a great organization full of great people with a great culture, and a little bit to some degree we tried to mimic it here.
Yeah. You mentioned the decision to move to Warsaw. Talk about Warsaw for those folks who don't know. To me, it's one of the great, great community. Obviously, the orthopedic capital gets a lot of attention for that, but a community in an area that's a pretty nice place to live.
Yeah, Warsaw is the orthopedic capital of the world. To this day, if you get a joint replaced in the United States, there's about a 65% market share opportunity that was created here, engineered here, and sold from here. It's not quite the overarching impact of the economy of Kosciuszko County that it was 25 years ago, but it's still omnipresent with DePuy Synthes, which will soon be spun out more than likely from Johnson & Johnson, Zimmer Biomet, which represents the merger of Zimmer and Biomet, and Medtronic, who has made a decision to not only remain in Kosciuszko County, but grow their presence here. That presence of a sophisticated orthopedic industry workforce creates cultural and social opportunities that wouldn't normally exist in a town of 13,000 people. It's a great place to be from. It's a great place to raise your kids, which I did. And there's a stable economic environment. We're in the Zimmer Biomet credit facility, but we don't bank Zimmer Biomet, but we sure benefit from the presence of that sector here. But we've continued to see diversification. Something you guys have followed, Slate Automotive.
Yeah.
Going to build a $25,000 EV in a closed R.R. Donnelly plant. And Chris Barman, their CEO, and I talked 2 weeks ago, and they're going full bore in the renovation and conversion of that plant. And the ultimate plan is to have 2,000 people working in it.
Wow. What's your take? Workforce is so important, obviously, David, a big issue, not only in Indiana, but all over the place. As you look at the pipeline and big focus on specifically the orthopedics pipeline, but you mentioned, Slate Automotive and some of the other, diversifying economy. How would you describe the workforce pipeline and any concerns about where that's headed?
You might recall that I was a state trustee for Ivy Tech for 6 years in the Daniels administration era. And what Ivy Tech has done so well under Sue Ellsman's leadership following Tom Snyder is to really be a part of the manufacturing sector and understanding, and I say manufacturing, healthcare, sciences. Where is it that people can benefit from a 2-year degree or even a certification? So I think Ivy Tech has really filled a void in Warsaw, in Kosciuszko County, that we had from a workforce readiness, workforce development perspective. I think that the orthopedic medical device sector is such an interesting one from a skills and workforce perspective, because we still have human beings polishing titanium joints, and robots don't do it with the precision that humans do. But that will certainly be an evolution of that technology, and science might replace the hardware along the way.
Yeah.
I think that some of the programs that we have going on in connection with Grace College here, with Notre Dame being much more involved than they used to be in the life sciences, with Indiana University Fort Wayne and Purdue University Fort Wayne, with St. Francis. We've got an incredible amount of secondary education in our footprint of North Central and Northeast Indiana, all of which is contributing to this workforce readiness and workforce development. I think also the other cool thing that goes back to this population growth, we will have the ability to retain more people in our footprint than we have historically, thanks to the diversity of the economy. And things have come together very nicely with secondary ed stepping into that role.
David, you're in an industry very competitive. You're very active and committed locally to a number of local interests. What keeps you motivated personally, professionally, on a regular basis?
Community banking is truly a privilege to be involved with. You could talk to any number of community bankers in the state of Indiana that love to make a difference in the communities we operate in. Just earlier today, I was talking about the 4 foundational components of our business. That's employees, communities, clients, and shareholders. And as a community bank, you really do get to have the foundational component that says, I know most of the 700 plus people that work here. I'm part of a 20-year club at Lake City Bank that is over 100 people that have been here for 20 years or more. And particularly with our organic growth strategy, we've so been able to build a team that's reflective of the workforce in its entirety. And I love being a community banker. There's nothing that I could possibly imagine doing that I would enjoy more than this, except being a dentist, but that one didn't work out.
Yeah, so much for that. That D+ in biology kind of derailed that, right? Hey, as we wrap up, David, so much change has occurred at the bank, Northern Indiana, throughout the state. But as you look 10 years out, what do you think you'll see when it comes to Lake City Bank and maybe even the Warsaw area and some of the areas you're banking in now? What do you envision this things looking like 10 years from now?
Yeah, we've spoken several times about population growth in our footprint. And as I said earlier, we apologized for a couple decades for the lack of population growth in our Indiana markets. And what we've seen from our state leadership and government since Mitch Dan's election is one that is pro-business, pro-economic expansion, pro-growth. There's a few challenges out there right now that people are dealing with, but I think we've done a tremendous job in Indiana of creating regionalization for economic growth. We're very involved in the South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership. Kristen Pruitt, our president, is very engaged on that RDA. I'm currently chairing the Northeast Indiana Regional Partnership. I'm on the CICP board, so I get to see it there. And the dynamic that we have today relative to past is that we've got this population growth that is being driven by investment, economic growth, manufacturing expansion, service sector expansion, and we don't think that's going to slow down. We all love to joke about our friends to the west in Illinois, and we're not seeing massive influx of Illinois companies, but certainly we're known as the pro-business state. And I love the fact that Governor Braun's bringing back the crossroads of America, because that's a reflection of a place that does things. I also like the state that works, but crossroads of America goes back to the license plates of our youth. So it's reflective of the great opportunities we have for growth here.
Well, David, it has been a real treat to catch up with you on the podcast, and I certainly appreciate you taking the time and appreciate all you do, not only for the bank, but for Indiana, Northern Indiana, Central Indiana, everywhere that you do business. You're a real contributor and a difference maker, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate the opportunity to talk.
All right. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Business and Beyond podcast, a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all of our episodes and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gerry Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Off the Record with Indiana's 250 most influential business and community leaders is a podcast that peels back the curtain on Indiana's most respected leaders, one episode at a time. Go beyond the headlines and hear the stories of grit and innovation that shape these leaders. Do you want to know who's driving our state forward? This is a must listen. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts or at ibjpodcast.com.
On the go? So are we. Get the IBJ Media app, your all-in-one news source for Indiana business news. Get breaking news alerts, read every story from IBJ, Inside Indiana Business, and the Indiana Lawyer, and listen to your favorite podcasts all in one place. Big news, small screen. Search IBJ Media and download the app today.